Atonement is defined by Merriam-Webster as reparation for an offense or injury, satisfaction. The second definition is the reconciliation of God and humankind through the sacrificial death of Jesus Christ. Synonyms include reparation and penance. Well, you can forget about all that. Atonement is another word that the Course redefines. As used in the Course, the atonement principle says that despite appearances to the contrary, you are still one with God and always. The Holy Spirit tells you to return your whole mind to God because it has never left Him. If it has never left Him, you need only perceive it as it is to be returned. The full awareness of the atonement then that the separation never occurred. Atonement is, in fact, the main emphasis of A Course in Miracles. This is not a course in philosophical speculation, nor is it concerned with precise terminology. It is concerned with or correction of perception. The means of the atonement is forgiveness. Atonement comes about when finally our unconscious mind realizes that the separation never occurred. We repeatedly forgive our brothers and sisters and see them as completely innocent. When you accept a brother's guiltlessness, you will see for by proclaiming it in him, you make it yours. His guiltlessness is your atonement. Grant it to him, and you will see the truth of what you have acknowledged. The atonement is the realization of the mind that there was no separation. It is the always been and will be one with God. The unconscious mind will realize this when the guilt is finally canceled out by repeated forgiveness. Once your unconscious mind has accepted the atonement and freed itself from all the guilt that the ego laid on it, your mind is enlightened. This happens during your last lifetime. Some people who become enlightened live for years after enlightenment, while others live for only a short time. Arton describes enlightenment in disappearance of the universe. When you're enlightened, you will completely awaken from the dream. Even though you appear to be in a body, you'll still see what the Course calls the real world. When you have completely forgiven the world, because the real world has no projections of unconscious guilt upon it. You'll see innocence everywhere, because it's your own innocence, the innocence of Christ. Arton describes enlightenment in several paragraphs in the last chapter of Jesus and Buddha. As you near the time of enlightenment, you more often feel the reality of heaven, and the world starts to feel distant. You begin to feel that what you see really is in your... And then it starts getting a little weird. It turns out you can read other people's thoughts, although you probably won't spend much time reading them, because it would overload you. But you can also get a general sense of what kind of attitude a person has. This should not be surprising. All connected, all part of one mind. After enlightenment, it becomes obvious to you that the world is a projection, and you can even see that the projector is you. Once you get to that point, fear is impossible, provided you keep in mind the reality beyond the dream. You almost don't even notice you have a body. You don't need much food or water, and at the very end, you don't need either. If your body is not healthy, it won't matter to you. You could actually heal your body with your mind, but you may choose not to. The Course calls your perception of the world upon enlightenment the real world. The real world is the symbol that the dream of sin and guilt is over, and God's Son no longer sleeps. His waking eyes perceive the sure reflection of his Father's love, that he is redeemed. The real world signifies the end of time, for its perception makes time purposeless. Finally, when your last lifetime is ended, you gently lay the body aside. God takes the final step to appear into the mind of God. You might expect that God would make a last judgment, proclaiming you innocent as you enter the gates of heaven. But Kenneth Wapnick says this last judgment is something else. The last judgment is not something God does, but rather it is our looking back on everything the ego made. This is no longer what I believe and choose to make real. The last judgment, therefore, is not punitive, but a totally benign judgment that simply sees the error for what it is and proclaims, to quote the workbook, what is false, what is true, has never changed. The essence of A Course in Miracles is that we have fallen asleep and are dreaming about a world that seems to be the opposite of the world we were in before we slept. The Course tells us that we can choose to wake up by forgiving what appears to be happening around us, but it's not really happening at all. The Course proclaims that our only power in this world is to choose against the ego, and that by continuing to choose forgiveness and the Holy Spirit's point of view, we can remove the guilt in our minds and free so that our awareness of God and heaven will be restored. On a day-to-day basis, we appear to have various choices available to us regarding how we spend our time, where we go, who we talk with, etc. In reality, it only seems like we have these choices because the dream seems so real. Remember, there's a veil of forgetfulness to wipe out all memory of what occurred before the Big Bang. Moreover, that veil prevents us from remembering that it is our own mind that has split and is responsible for projecting the world and all the things in it. Without that memory, no idea who we are, where we are, or why we are here. All we know is we were born into this world seemingly with no choice about the matter whatsoever. The world moves fast and is hostile, and we are on our own. Everything that seems to happen in this world is an illusion. Everything that has form is an illusion. Everything we can see, hear, smell, taste, or touch is part of a dream. The dream is a story about how a universe of time and from a Big Bang, and from the results of that bang, life sprung up out of nowhere, eventually resulting in a proliferation of bodies in multiple forms. None of it is true. As a mind, we dreamed we had separated from God. The dream took form on a macro level, the creation of the universe and objects that appeared and moved through space, as well as on a micro level, providing a different point of view for the billions of fragments of our mind. So each fragment, that's each one of spends these sequential lifetimes observing a tiny part of the universe in the context of one of the bodies that lives in the dream. The whole story, dreamed by our mind, was made up in an instant. Before the dream, there was no such thing as time. Once the storylines, our individual lives, for the dream were set, we began observing these lives from the point of view of which is born, grows, decays, and dies. The entire lifetimes of all of the characters in the dream were all set the instant the dream was made up. The story is told by the ego, and the belief in separation is and again in the story. But as the ego developed the story, it became influenced by the point of view of the Holy Spirit. The story ends with the triumph of the Holy Spirit as all of the sons of God wake up, even though the Holy Spirit did not start the story. The entire story was set when the dream was originally dreamed. We are now living the dream from the point of view of a body in the dream. When that body dies, we then experience the dream from the point of view of another body. The ego has placed a veil of forgetting as we experience these various lifetimes, so we don't remember anything that happens in our previous lifetimes. But obviously, the guilt that has been in our mind throughout our previous lifetimes continues to play out in our present lifetime. However, while we cannot consciously recall what happened in our previous lifetimes, our unconscious mind retains it all. It never forgets. That means that the learning of previous lifetimes is available to us on an unconscious level. That forgiveness lessons learned in previous lifetimes need not be repeated. We carry over guilt from previous lifetimes, but that also means that if we reduce the guilt in our minds through forgiveness in one lifetime, we carry over less guilt in a lifetime. So we're going through these lifetimes, one after another, and we have no control over what happens in them. The events in the dream are set. And if we realize this, then we would have no reason to fight within the illusion to make events happen the way we want them to. Can we not change what's going on? But once you realize that nothing is going on anyway, you see there is no point in trying to change it. We think that our own thoughts, which seem separate and shielded from the thoughts of others, could not possibly have an effect on the events that appear to happen in this world. However, it should be obvious to you that you can control your thoughts about what happens, even though you cannot control what actually happens. It turns out that our ability to control our own thoughts full ability we have in this world. It is our superpower. The Course asks merely that we control our thoughts by forgiving whatever appears to happen. Sometimes it may seem that you have a daunting task ahead of you, spending many years forgiving what appears to happen right in front of you. The Course seeks to assure you that your path will lead to God. You may wonder how you can be at peace when, there is so much that must be done before the way to peace is open. Perhaps this seems impossible to you, but ask yourself if it is possible that God would have a plan for your salvation that does not work. Once you accept His plan as the one function, there will be nothing the Holy Spirit will not arrange for you without your effort. He will go before you, making straight your path, and leaving in your way no stones to trip on, and no obstacles to bar your way. Nothing you need will be denied. Not one seeming difficulty but will melt away before you reach it. You need take thought for nothing, careless of everything except the only purpose you would fulfill. As that was given you, so will its fulfillment be. God's guarantee will hold obstacles, for it rests on certainty and not a contingency. It rests on you, and what could be more certain than a son of God?